Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture, and today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Yelawolf called Trunk Muzik 3. But before we get to Yelawolf proper, look, as much as I don't want to go here, there's no way to talk about the current intersection of hip-hop and country than this whole Lil Nas X debacle. Now, I gave my opinion on all this fairly recently. Frankly, this has been a meme that should have died a week or so ago, but there are some weird conversations about cultural exchange, not helped by Old Town Road being a joke song that could feel vaguely credible within mainstream country right now, especially given what's been let in, and then spun in a disingenuous nature after the song was yanked from the Billboard country charts. Well, I'd put up more to Nashville and Music Row's interference than anything else. And let's be honest, most hip-hop journalists don't know Music Row. But there's a question that's not being answered in most of this conversation, and it's this. Putting aside the blatant opportunism, did Lil Nas X really care about landing on the country charts in the first place? Was he looking to carve out a space in the genre? Or was he just aiming to grab the free playlist promo like any aspiring artist would want? And I bring all this up because there are acts that are trying to carve out a niche in both country and hip-hop, to be credible and respectful of the sound in both lanes and treat this actually seriously. And surprise, surprise, the most prominent in the 2010s has been Yelawolf. He might have started off in straightforward southern hip-hop with the Trunk Muzik series, but by 2015's Love Story, he was actively fusing in country tones that worked way better than I think anybody expected, which he followed up with in 2017 after a rough year in Trial by Fire. And while the mainstream music press had a really hard time grappling with the sonic fusion, his raw sales success and the organic groundswell proved there was something there that worked. He had an audience. But since he signed to Shady, his mainstream promotion on the charts was non-existent, and neither album seemed to have the impact that they really should have, especially Trial by Fire. Now, thankfully, his new project Trunk Muzik 3 was his last project with Shady before he could get the hell out of there, and it's a straightforward return to southern hip-hop, which I'll admit seemed to be a bit of a disappointment coming from manufacturing a distinctive lane, held a cross-section between hip-hop and country who could have made some bank off the controversy. But if that's what's needed to recapture the mainstream attention before he goes indie or re-signed to another label, I get it. I guess I'll take it for now. And what irked me more was how he stepped away from the producer's chair to bring back his old crew from the Trunk Muzik albums, but okay, that kind of makes sense. So what do we get on Trunk Muzik 3? Well, honestly, I'm not even sure where to start with this one. And really, I'd argue that my reaction to this album will differ significantly from most of the old school fans who fell off when he brought in more country sounds. Because yes, it is absolutely returned to a southern hip-hop and trap sound, and Yelawolf remains a really good rapper, but it's hard to avoid just how much Trunk Muzik 3 feels compromised. A regression to an older sound that might have been passable, but is just nowhere as interesting as his last two albums. What this album reminds me of more, bear with me on this, Little Mix's LM5 from last year. Of course not in terms of the sound, but in just how much of the project feels flimsily produced and a transitional effort as he exits Shady. And while it's hard to pinpoint any direct animosity towards his old label, it's very telling that Eminem on a hip-hop album doesn't contribute a verse, but Machine Gun Kelly does, as it looks like Yelawolf and MGK finally squashed their beef that nobody really cared about. I mean, shame the music seems to have suffered in the meantime though, and for as much as Yelawolf might be planning this album to land him at another label, I'd argue it's just not his best foot forward whatsoever, and really is not all that good. But let's start off with Yelawolf himself. And look, I have always liked him as an MC. He's got star power, the raw charisma, fiery presence, and distinctive lyrical flair that puts him in a unique lane. Sure, his singing has never been all that good, at all, and all the oily vocal production they try to tack on here only seems to draw more attention to his voice in comparison with the older country rap tunes that are a little more forgiving of rougher tones. But you know what, I've heard worse from Yelawolf, and I was willing to be at least somewhat forgiving of him reassembling his typical crew of producers to make this work for a Trunk Muzik album. Hell, we'll get to this in a bit, but the album is rife with references to previous Trunk Muzik projects. It's clearly a sequel, and it's also clear that he at least thinks he's in his comfort zone. But with all of that, what threw me for a loop was how so many bars just felt undercooked or slapdash, and that's before we consider the hooks that don't come close to his best. More words that are rhyme with themselves, rhymes that are outright dropped or are locked in a stuttered repetition to fill up hooks, flows that actually go off beat, and well, of course Machine Gun Kelly will sound worse on Rowdy, Yelawolf is a much better MC than MGK. I'm not giving him a pass with this. Now, for the other guest stars, well, I wasn't impressed by the flows from Kasky, Big Henry, Mop Top, and Cook Up Boss. Most of these guys I haven't even heard of. But Doobie arguably stole the song on No Such Thing as Free, and then Rittz unsurprisingly did the same on Box Chevy 6, and the late Shoddy Fat delivered a guttural but really potent verse on We Slum, and was sadly let down by a lot of the hook. But okay, if the content is willing to go above and beyond, of which I know Yelawolf is capable, I'm more inclined to give him a pass. And this is where we run into the much bigger problem. I mean, for one, if you're expecting the visceral storytelling and heightened stakes of a song like Sabrina off Trial by Fire, this album doesn't remotely come close with delivering, more just content to play with the Slumerican iconography that shows the countrified version of Southern hip-hop flexing that's overflowing with all the detail that's always given Yelawolf's music a lot of color and flair. And you know what? Maybe a return to that lane, that's enough. I'd certainly say that Yelawolf is more willing than most to describe the abject poverty, the violence, the drug abuse, and the messy Southern kitsch that is emblematic of the Bible Belt in his lane within it. And that's immediately more interesting than the 1000th trap banger I've heard time and time again on Billboard Breakdown. But even if this album is framed as going back to what worked in hip-hop for him, his roots, and it's very telling on how over here he references the new lane he created for himself and doesn't indulge in it the entire album, but this is content that's starting to feel a little bit recycled and honestly kind of two-dimensional, not as deep as previous projects, especially in comparison with those albums and on the topic of drugs specifically. Now, some of this can be skirted with how Yelawolf tries to bring back his Catfish Billy alter ego to indulge in some of the nastier, grittier scenes, but it feels really thinly sketched, and framing is a lot blurrier than it should be. The song Drugs is a big example of this, a song that seemed to be trying to show the complicated mess of contradictions surrounding being around drugs in his youth and really his entire life, with moments of euphoria but a lot of darker consequences just out of frame. But it doesn't come close to matching his battles with alcoholism on Empty Bottles or Daylight. Further on, you get the desperation and deflection that drugs can fill on addiction, but the verses are less structured and are all focused on other people, so the stakes don't even really match with the hook where it's focused on him. And then we get the weird split between songs where he's clearly high out of his mind, and then taking cheap pot shots at the new generation of kids coming up in trap who are doing much of the same thing that he did. And that's not even counting Over Here, which is a decent enough closer with a few well-deserved shots at Post Malone. Apparently there's been beef there as well, and I kind of wish Yelawolf would have cleaned his clock. But again, I wish he had skipped some of the subliminals and just gone for it, given that this album grows some real teeth, and maybe that could have happened. But no, on the flip side, we get sex songs like Special Kinda Bad and Like I Love You, and they're easily some of the worst songs Yelawolf has made in some time. Clumsy, badly performed, and about the furthest thing from sexy. They almost read like parodies of this sort of song in this genre. Now granted, in those cases specifically, the production absolutely does not help. The former song is riding chipmunk fragments, a honky synth, a gurgling guitar pickup, and a prominent marching band snare drum, because you know, that's sexy. And the latter having a hook that reminds me more of Akon than any of the auto-crooners where that sound could potentially work. But if I were to highlight anything that really sank this album for me, it probably would be the production. And it's not the beats. The heavy 808s and the bass and some of the trap snares, they've got the meaty impact I've always liked about the Trunk Muzik series. But instead, some of the most buzzy and overmixed melodies I have heard in some time, including a bunch of female vocal samples dropped into the hook that have nothing close to the soul or firepower to match anything here. They don't have the impact of those beats. If anything, the melodies are just mixed to try to pick up the same texture as some of the rap rock guitars that he has used before, but instead they seem to mute the organic distortion that worked on those earlier albums, or are placed up against synth tones that just sound terrible. I mean, I was okay with the wispy fiddle on Catfish Billy 2, so why'd you drop that keening mess on top of it? Or the watery whistles on Rowdy? Or how much the guitars are crushed into a textureless mess on Trailer Park Hollywood, or All the Way Up? Or the warped, tuneless grind as No Such Thing as Free and Over Again? Or why on earth Yelawolf thought he could get away with sampling International Players' Anthem, including the Pimp C samples? And I should also mention the vocal layering, because following in the same big production problem on Love Story, on top of being way too clean, and like because he's working with the same crew this time, the vocal lines just feel plastered on top of the trap beats instead of being well blended into the mix and balanced out. A crushing clash that might get in your face, but it either marginalizes the melody or puts it in the vocal samples or Yelawolf's bad singing, neither of which are compelling enough for me to revisit. And then there are issues with the Yelawolf projects that seem all the more glaring here, namely around some slapdash sequencing and running a little bit too long. Ironic given this is his shortest album in some time, but when the content doesn't really evolve or engage or go deeper or showcase even some deeper layers, the latter is just a real issue. This album starts becoming a chore and a lot of these songs really just run together. Now I could go on with all of this, namely how the references to Eminem and Shady feel increasingly clunky and token, but all of it can be explained by Yelawolf returning to a sound that is not playing to the unique strengths and lane that he created. A callback to a time where there was a familiar audience, but just isn't punching as high as he could if he's going back to hip-hop. And the frustrating fact is that I get why he's doing it. In changing labels, it's probably best to put your most accessible foot forward to prove your marketability. With a straightforward southern hip-hop lane, we'll probably get him there in 2019. But the subtext of this move is that it can't be a regression in quality. If you're going back to a more widely accepted comfort zone, you should be doing so and doing it better by leaps and bounds. And Trunk Muzik 3 is not that by any stretch. Now, if I'm being forgiving, I will say it's got enough uneven spots of quality, some good guest verses, and Yelawolf's raw charisma to keep this above sounding straight out bad, but it is mediocre, and it really should be a hell of a lot better, which means I'm giving it a strong 5 out of 10, and I really can't recommend it. Now, if you're a Yelawolf diehard fan, or you've been waiting for more of this hip-hop sound, by all means get on board. It's for you. He's gonna need that support going forward with wherever he resigns. But if he's gonna brag about defining a unique lane, the least you can expect are songs that are actually there. And for everyone else, again, there's better hip-hop and country that dropped last Friday than this. And honestly, you could probably just move on. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Man, this is gonna piss off a lot of people. Look, I am a Yelawolf fan. I've been a Yelawolf fan when a lot of his former fans deserted him, and to see him go back to this, I wanted it to work, and I don't think it does. And hey, if you want to buy or stream the album, links down there below. Polls up there for y'all to tell me how wrong I am. Looking forward to it. And if there's anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. Just a quick reminder to you all, Billboard Breakdown, my weekly series where I go into the Hot 100, has now been moved to its own distinctive channel. There will be links in the title card here. I'd happy if you guys want to hop on board, just so we can get things back up to where they were before. But hey, until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.